So if you have a question, please ask me on Wednesday. It might be the best time. Okay? But you know what? There's nothing like, you don't have to wait until then. You don't have to wait. Let's see how we're doing with streaming. It's pretty good. All right, we're back. We are COMP123 in the summer of 2019, and we're at Centennial, and we just finished talking about Assignment 5. We're Lesson 11, Part 2 of our broadcast this week, and we're getting into a new topic. We're talking about LINQ and access to data. We kind of talked about LINQ earlier in our lecture series so far, but we're going to talk about it again, right? And what I really want to focus on today is more around how do I use LINQ when I connect to a database. How do I do that? And what do I mean by database and all that stuff? Anyway, how do I get to a database in my Visual Studio? Is it an Access database like it says in the PowerPoints? No, it's not. It's a SQL database that we're going to access locally to your machine. Okay, now you guys have been taking database this semester, so you should have some experience with databases by now. Yes? So this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be accessing a SQL database that's local to your machine. Okay? Let's get into this. So again, we're going to be talking about some database access and what databases are. I'm going to flash by those slides. They're kind of at the beginning. And then we're going to get right into understanding LINQ again and a refresher on LINQ. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, and we're going to talk about it again. I'm not going to talk about primary keys and stuff. You guys should know all this stuff from databases. And this is not a database course, but it's here for your viewing pleasure. You have a table with some fields, and you have a primary key, and usually it's auto-incrementing, right? And you have a table. In our case, our tables are going to be non-relational. They're just going to be like one table you're going to have to access because, again, we're giving you some simple examples. Okay, we're going to skip forward. Talk about primary keys here and normalization and what those are, and structured query language, which you guys should know. But one thing we want to get to when it comes to structured query language, and by the way, there's a little primer here on how to use that if you never did database for whatever reason, or you're not taking database this semester. You're going to get to this point where you're going to have access to your data through LINQ. So this is where we're at. I've skipped forward to around slide 24. The rest is all kind of like a refresher on what databases are and that stuff, just in case, for whatever reason, you're in a course and you're kind of off book right now, and you're kind of like here, let's say you're taking COMP123 and you're not really in database right now for whatever reason. Okay? So here we have LINQ, which is Language Integrated Query, which is we talked about earlier this semester, or a couple weeks ago. And what LINQ allows us to do is replace our standard SQL query, which are usually in quotes, with method-based or function-based selectors, like the select statement, keyword, my from keyword, my where keyword. And what I can do is I can use those three keywords and others, right? For example, order by, to get data from a collection, like we talked about before. Last time we saw an example with a list. This time we're actually going to use this to access the data from our database. So here's an example of what we saw before, which you have this list of integers, remember? And you have this number, 6421, whatever. And so this is initialization of this integer array, actually. And what we're doing is we're looking to use these kinds of keywords. So var, again, in this case, it's going to kind of declare, I don't know what type this is, but what I want to do is I want to get for every number in numbers, that's why it says x, for every x in numbers, I want you to think about this from statement like a for each loop. For each number in numbers, look at all these numbers where my number is greater than the cutoff, 3. Select or return is what it should be. Return this number back into this high numbers variable. That's what it does. So let's take a look at this. Which one does matches that? 6 matches, 4 matches, 2 no, 1 no, 8 yes, 3 no because it's greater than, 7 yes, 5 yes, 2 no, 0 no. Right? So what it's going to return is 6, 4, 8, 7, 5. Okay, that's what it's going to return, and it's going to store that list inside of the high numbers variable. Okay, and then we can use another for each loop to loop through that list, high numbers, and return each of those objects out, or assign them to other variables or other labels. In your case, it's going to be text boxes or labels or something else. Okay, that's what's going to happen. So that's how LINQ works. And remember, we have to use the system.link using statement. By default, it's included in every one of your forms. By default, you don't have to do anything. Okay? Next, so this is the output, like we talked about. And, okay, but what if you have a more complex case where instead of an integer, you have a student? And we're going to do this example today in class. Okay? So I have my student, and we have a public student constructor. I'm looking for a student ID and a name and some kind of average, their GPA, which is going to come in here, right? And you can see that I'm going to store this information in these public properties, ID number, name, and grade point average, right? And that's my student class. So now I can do the same thing. I can make an array of students, and I can make a bunch of different students with different IDs, names, and GPAs. And I can run the same exact thing. I can say, well, for every student in students, right, give me the student that has a GPA that's greater than the cutoff, which is 3.0, which means I'm going to return this guy. I'm going to return this guy right here, number 4, and this one. So only 3 students made the cutoff. The rest were either at 3.0 or below, which means I don't want those. And then I'm going to loop through that same list and output that information. Okay, same idea. Whether it's a simple variable like an integer or a primary or I would say a primitive type, integer, float, string, whatever, or a complex type like your own class, right? LINQ will help you sort through that data and return stuff. But why is this important? Because when it comes to connecting to a database, what we want to do is we want to use LINQ to connect you to another greater data source with more than one piece of data. Okay? This is where LINQ is really handy and becomes really powerful. Alright, that's pretty cool. Let's look at some examples live. So now we're going to do kind of a lecture lab. I want you to bring up Visual Studio, please. Here's my Visual Studio 2017. Now you guys are the C team. So I'm going to go File, New, Project. I'm going to call this project COMP123 in the summer 2019 semester, and it's lesson 11C. Just like before, I'm going to click on or check off Create New Git Repository and press OK. And it's going to open my little application like we've seen many times before now. My form is blank, and I want to start by making this form. I'm just going to hide this right now. I'm going to start by making this form, renaming this form from Form 1. This is taking its sweet time today. From Form 1, I want to change it to Main Form. So please rename that form from Form 1 to Main Form. Why is this taking so long? Who knows why is the answer. Who knows why, right? Not me, that's for sure. Just previously to this, it worked just great, right? By the way, if you ever see this kind of stuff and do one of these and try and start, it's not going to make it run any differently. It's just going to make this run, but it's not going to take away that message. See, it's going to keep on cycling like this, which is really annoying. So I'm just going to put this down here and ignore it. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? I'll put it down here. You don't see it, but I'm still going to have access to this, all right? One thing that can help me sometimes when you ever see this problem, if you ever see this thing cycling like this, is you can try and save everything, like File, Save, Save All. That might help. And then just close off Visual Studio and then reopen it, right? Sometimes that helps. So if I close off Visual Studio and then come back and I can look at my previous project like list 11C and reopen it, sometimes it'll just help and I'll be back. I'm good, right? Sometimes it won't. Sometimes it'll break your code and you just have to make a new project. Don't worry about it. All right, but let's suppose that this is the case. I'm going to rename this form from form 1. I'm going to rename it to main form. I'm going to have two forms in this this version right now, right? The first form is going to be start form. It's going to be a splash screen. And the second form is going to be main form, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm going to get my properties from main form, and I'm going to change my text in the title bar to say main form. I'm also going to change the font size by default, right, to a big font size so we can change it later to 20, just to make it easier for you to see. I'm going to change my size of my form to 800 by 600. We've done this before, lots of times. Also, my start position is going to go to center screen, so those are the things that we've immediately changed on my main form. Nothing new there. One thing I don't want is I don't want to be able to maximize my main form, so I'm going to go to my maximize box and turn that to false. So no maximization. Right? Because it doesn't make sense. And also, I want to change my form border style from sizable to fixed single, which will stop the user from resizing the form. I don't want that. I don't want the user to resize the forms. I'm just going to change it. And if I run this form right now, it should look like this. Nice and blank, and 800 by 600. For your assignment number 5, you're not going to have the same restrictions that you did for assignment number 4. 320 by 480 was a test for you to do a good design and be able to fit everything you can inside that space, right? And some of you can't, for whatever reason, right? But most of you could do it. Some people ask for assignment 4, what about that extra keyboard? Where does that go? You guys should know the answer to that. There's two solutions that I've seen so far for people who have shown me. One is that keyboard that goes away and hides, which I showed you how to do, right? And the other solution is someone made their own keyboard form. So when you click on that, another form pops up, and they use a separate form for the keyboard. That's also acceptable. I'm okay with that. However you do it, whether you use a separate form for the keyboard, or whether you have a keyboard that slides away and come back, doesn't matter to me. All right? It's still a bonus. So I have my main form, but I want to add a new form. I want to make another one. Again, a couple ways to do this. I can right-click on my project here, and I can go to Add a New Item and select my form. Or, if you're like me, you might have a quick hit item down here, which is Windows Form in your menu. So I'm going to click this one. It's still going to take me to my Windows Form selection, and it's going to say Form 1. And I'm going to rename this thing to Start Form. And I'm going to press Enter. It's going to make my start form, right? And I have to configure it a little bit, just like before. I'm going to go to Properties, and I'm going to make sure that the start form says Start Space Form, right? But remember that you're not going to see this. This is going to be a splash form, right? I'm going to make the default size, again, just like we did before, my font size. I'm going to make my font size 20. I'm going to make the form 800 by 600 again by going down to size. So first I did the font size, then I did the pixel size or point size. But this is going to be a special form. It's going to be a splash form. Last week I asked you to do it. This week I'm going to show you how to do it. All right? So this is how you do your splash form from beginning to end. So here's my start form. I want to change my background color to something else. Let's make my background color dark gray. So we know it's kind of a start form, right? On a splash screen, you don't need any kind of border at all. So I'm going to go to Form Border Style and change it from sizable to none, which is going to look like this. There's no form border at all. I'm still going to change my start location or start position to center screen. And that's what I'm going to do. So that's this is the form. It's going to start. There's no borders, right? Notice my size dropped to 784 by 561 because I lost the title bar and I lost my borders in the side of my form, top, bottom, left, and right. So I have smaller form. In fact, let's just make this a tiny bit smaller. So because normally a splash screen doesn't take all of the form up, we can make it something like 780 by 5. let's say by 500. So 780 by 500. So kind of a little bit smaller than the rest of the thing. And we want to put some kind of message here. Usually what we do is we put a logo for your company. We might put a message that's loading, your application is loading. You might show the application loading. There's lots of stuff you can put here. For our example, we're just going to put a label, a big label. Just going to drag a label in here. I'm going to call this the welcome label. So I'm going to go up to the top. It's going to be called welcome label. I'm also going to change the auto size property to false, so I can size this thing the way I want, right? And I'm going to change the font size of my label to like 56. I think that's probably around right. I'm going to change the label so it says welcome to my app. And if it's too big, I can always go back and change everything. There we go. It's welcome to my app. Notice it's kind of like, it doesn't show you if it's in the middle because it doesn't do that. It just helps you with this a little bit. There's approximately where it should be. I can go and center it exactly. I'm not going to. Are you with me? This is a splash screen, yeah. Font size 56. I just chose an arbitrary number, 56. If it's too big for you, make the font size smaller. It doesn't matter. Don't worry, it's just an example, guys. All right? What was that? Yeah, so you can, that's fine. As long as it makes sense for you. All right, so now, if I have this working, it's not going to start, right? How do I make another form start instead of my main form? How do I do that? I talked about this last week at length. Does anyone remember? Yes, I have to go to my programs, program.cs file. So here's my program.cs file over here. I'm going to double click onto it. It's going to take me here to my program.cs. Okay. I want to add these two forms. And I'm going to show you the dumber way to do it, not with a dictionary. Last week I showed you how to do it with a dictionary. This time I'm going to do, first thing, I'm going to change my program class to public. And on the top here, I'm going to make two new forms. All right? The first form is going to be called the start form. Start form, we're going to call it start form. And it needs to be public and static. Okay? Public static, or else you can't access it from here. So, public, can't type, static. There we go, public static. All right? And I'm going to do the same thing for my main form. Public, static, main form, main form. Let's make sure it's named correctly, as per our style. That's the first thing. So that's on line like 11 and 12 on our program.cs file. And then somewhere between application set compatible text rendering and application run, I'm going to make a couple spaces and I'm going to instantiate those two forms. So first I'm going to say start form is equal to a new start form, and then main form is equal to a new main form. So why am I doing this? Because it's better to have my forms loaded ahead of time. Why? It makes traversal easy. I can go back and forth. I can just hide and show whichever form I want, right? This is the reason why I'm doing it. And there's other ways to do this, and some other coding houses may ask you to do things differently. That's fine, but you should know at least one way to be able to do this. Alright, so instead of starting off with main form, I want to start off with start form, which is my splash screen. So I'm going to go there, my start form. Except when I use this now, I haven't coded it to close and open up the next form. Yes? Sorry, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to do start form. Thank you for that. I actually did that wrong earlier today. But yes, this is what I want to do, start form. So what this does is it basically says, hey, this start form is the one I want to start with. I instantiated here, I want to use it here in my application run. Okay? And then if I go to my start form designer, if I start, it's not going to do much. It's just going to sit there and hang forever. One thing also I may want to do with my splash screen, sometimes you'll see them like they're partly see-through or transparent. So I'm going to change my opacity to 80%. And if I start now, you can see that it's partly see-through, if you really want to do that. I'm just doing that as an effect. It's not required. But how do I make this disappear? Well, remember we talked about this. In my toolbox, there's another section called components. And inside there, you have the timer component. The timer component can be used to basically time when you want to, put away your splash screen. So I'm going to drag this timer component onto the form somewhere, which creates a little gutter in here. And this little gutter is where my components are going to be shown. My timer component, I just dragged and dropped it from my toolbox. It's called timer 1. That's not a good name. Let's call this the splash timer, right? And my interval, it can't be 100 milliseconds. I want it to change after 3 seconds, which means 3,000 milliseconds. So make sure this is changed to 3,000. Okay? It's enabled by false, so it's not enabled by default. And what I want to do is in the back here, my form, if I double click on my form, it's going to go to the form load event. So in my form load event, I want to say that this is the event handler for the form load event, right? And in here, I want to go to my splash timer and I want to enable it. So what this does is it starts counting down, right? So it shows my form, it enables my splash timer, and then I need an event. So when it's ready to tick again and go to the next interval, it's going to trigger a new event. So if I go to my startform.cs now, if I double click on my splash timer down here, it's going to generate another event. This is the event handler for the splash timer tick event. Okay, I'm just calling it splash timer. You can call it something that makes sense for you. And then what I want to do in my splash timer is, first of all, I want to make sure it doesn't tick again, right? I don't want it to do it again. Every time it ticks, every time it goes another interval, it'll generate a new form. We don't want that, right? So I want to splash timer.enabled is equal to false immediately. Then I want to show my main form and hide this form. So main form. And how do I get to it? I got to go to program, right? Remember program dot main form lowercase dot show and then this dot hide. That's the solution, guys, for how to get from one form to the other. Yes?
Can I hide it first?
Doesn't matter. Hiding doesn't take it away. Hiding only hides it. But I recommend showing it first. Sometimes timing makes a difference. Alright, so if I run it now, you should see it. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and then boom, it opens up the new form. Okay, that's how it should work. However, I got a problem. I can't close this form off because my program.cs points to the start form as the main form that starts off. That means the only way this program is going to stop right now is if my start form is closed, or if I call explicitly application.exit. And I can do that inside of my my main form. Again, if I press F7, it'll bring up my my little coding window, my code behind file. And what I want to do here is in my main form, right? I'm going to bring this up for a second. I want to make sure that when I click the X button on the top, it goes to another event. Actually, what we want to do is handle the form closing event. All right, and we can get that by going to properties. And if I go to my lightning bolt here, and if I go to my form closing event, if I double click on my form closing event, you can see that the main form closing event comes up. All right, so again, I can go to //
What's the difference between form closed and form closing?
when form closed is closed. Nothing you can do. Right, form closing just before it finishes closing. And the reason why I recommend it there and not in form closed is because sometimes your application will exit with it'd be a dirty exit. It won't work properly. Do your application exit in form closing, not form closed. However, you could do some cleanup in form closed. If you want to do garbage collection or close off files or whatever, that's the time to do it. All right, here I'm going to do, this is the event handler for the main form's form closing event. It's a special type of event, the form closing event. And here what I'm just going to say application exit, application.exit, which basically exits the application and it'll work. Because C# does automatic garbage collection, you don't have to worry about closing off start form. However, if you really wanted to, you could say start form.close as well. If you did that, it would close the application too. And doesn't matter. Both are actually instantiated. Start form and main form, right? Start form is what we started with, right? So if start form closes, everything closes. That's how it works, right? If I close off, I can do application exit, or I can just say start form.close. Same, right? So if I started this off now, you can see that I have 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and then here we are. If I close this off, it closes now. Maybe I should say Mississauga since we're in Canada, right? Not Mississippi. Sorry, it was steamboats. 1 steamboat, 2 steamboat, 3 steamboat when I was a kid. All right, so are we good? So that's your splash screen. So that's all what I asked you to do last week with your splash screen. That covers that, and that also is the same requirement for your assignment number 5, right? You need a splash screen. You'll also need a splash screen for your final test, right? So please be advised. On your final test, you can have access to all your code examples. You will not have access to videos. You won't be able to watch videos during your test. That's not allowed, okay? Or talking to anybody. I know. Can you imagine that? You're doing a test and you're watching a video, right? It's kind of weird. So yeah, so the answer is no. All right, so cool. So we've started running this stuff, and we've got this part, and we don't really need this anymore. I'm not going to go back to my start form anymore, so I'm just going to close those off to make more room up here. And I got my main form, but now what I want to do is I want to add in a menu. So notice we didn't cover this. This is new. I want to go to my menu and toolbars, menus and toolbars. And the first thing I want is my menu strip. Let's get that menu strip out. So I'm going to just drag and drop here onto the form. You can see that it takes up the whole top of the form, and it also creates another component, right? Now this is only the component that lives inside of main form. And you can see if I go to my Solution Explorer, sorry, my properties, for my main form menu strip, it's just called menu strip. Sometimes I like to call this the main menu strip. I might have more than one. I mean, it's not really that important, but I can rename it here. I can say main menu strip. And that'll also modify what it is down here. You can also right-click and rename down here. But we want to rename that. Okay, so if I was going to make a basic menu strip, how would I make it? Well, look at the example of Visual Studio. It has File, Edit, View, Help, right? And by the way, you want to keep your menus Windows safe. You know, so when a Windows user comes and uses it, they're not confused, right? They're like, hey, where's my file menu? They should know. It should be the same standard that we use everywhere else, right? So I could type in here, File, and then the next one, notice there's a little space up here. I can type in Edit, and I can type in here, View, and then I can type it over here, Help. I could do that by hand, right? Or if I click on the whole menu strip, there's a little smart arrow. These smart arrows are cool. And notice it says that the dock is the top. I can undock it. I can also decide to dock it on the left or on the right or on the bottom, right? I can make a menu on the bottom if I want. Whatever makes sense for you, right? I can also say the grip style is hidden, or I can say visible. So I can tear the menu away and move it somewhere else, right? And it says insert standard items. I could also insert standard items. If I click insert standard items, it actually does this. So it does it all for me. So I don't need this, this, and this, and I can just delete those by right-clicking and deleting, or just pressing delete. Notice what I get when I do standard items. It actually does all my work for me. Kind of cool, huh? And it also has these shortcut keys it enables too. Guys, do this. Insert standard items. Why do it yourself when it does it for you? Here's something else it does. Take a look. I don't need my new. I'm never going to have a new document, so I can get rid of that. Let's just get rid of it. I can modify them, right? I don't need save as, so I'm probably going to get rid of this. I'm not going to print in this menu, but if I wanted to, I could leave this in. Let's just get rid of this. Print preview, I can definitely get rid of this. I do want this little separator, so if I go to File, you can see that I have Save, Open, Save, and then Exit, and I have these little separators. I can get rid of them if I want, or keep them. But these little separators, if you go down to the bottom here, you can see that I can add in a menu item by myself, or I can go in here and pull down a menu item, a combo box, a separator, or some kind of text box, whatever I want. And notice also that they have these little shortcuts, Control Z, Control Y, Control X. Where do I get those? Well, if I click on one of them, and if you go to the right, you can see that the shortcut keys is right here, Control Z, if you want to make your own shortcut keys. I'm not going to have an edit menu for my application, so I'm just going to delete it. So I'm going to right click and delete. And I'm not going to have a tools menu, so I'm going to right click and delete that. Under help, I have context, index, search, and about. I only care about my about box. I'm just going to get rid of the rest for now. But Microsoft does a really good job of helping us get standard menus set up with some really cool icons too. By the way, any of those icons, if I want an icon for a menu item, for example on File, Open, if I click on that, you can see that there's an image next to it, which is a system.drawing.bitmap image. And I can click on the image that I want or create my own. And the size for the image, the physical dimensions for the image are 16 by 16. So, if you want to, you can make your own. Or download a set from somewhere online. Totally easy and easy to put in. So if you want to make your own images, this is how you would do that. Alright, cool. So that's menus in a nutshell. I want to be able to exit. How do I exit? Just double click on the menu item like this. It creates an event. And then this is the event. I can say that this is the event handler for the exit tool strip menu item. I think it's a good name. Click event. I think the standard name that they gave you here in this case is good. It's the exit tool strip menu item click event. You know which one it is, right? By the way, could I use a shared event handler here? Absolutely. You can still do a shared event. For example, look, I have both of these two things, form closing. I could use one event to do the form closing. I could call it the exit event, right? And I can make sure that both of these events point to the same one, the exit event, right? But for now, we're just going to make them two separate ones. Application.exit. And both those two things, whether you're going to the menu and clicking here, my X, this is the, clicking the X, or here, clicking the exit button in the menu, both will close you. Let me try this out and try it out. 1 steamboat, 2 steamboats, 3 steamboats. There he is, right? I can close here, or I can go to File, Exit, and close there. Guys, menus are super duper easy in Windows Forms, and it's way easier than making it yourself. If you're actually going to, create your own menus, it's actually quite a difficult exercise, right? If you ever did it on the web, it's actually very challenging to do properly, right? So here, Microsoft does it all for you. It's a beautiful thing, right? So we talked about menus, but then there's something else we can also talk about. There's also an about box. Take a look at this. So I want the about box to open, and I could make my own form. One of the things that asks you to do inside of your application for assignment number 5 is make an about box. Okay, I could make my own form, but why? Because one exists. Let me show you. Sometimes Microsoft really helps us out. So here I am in my Solution Explorer. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to Add New Item, and I'm going to look through down here and see, look, oh, there's an about box. Here's one, about box 1. Let's call this my about form, because that's what it is. It's another form. I'm going to click Add. This is my about form, and look, it gives us a little form, pre-made, just for us. Now all of this is modifiable, right? You can change out the picture box. You could change out the text box information. You could change the button to make it look different. But this little about form is made by Microsoft. Okay, a couple things. So if I go to the about form and I want to go to my properties for the about form, I want to change the title bar to say about, and maybe whatever my application was called, about my app, whatever that app is. I could also modify some of the stuff that comes up, right? For example, right now it shows me that I have my my stuff in order. One thing to note is my button is pretty small, right? If I wanted to make this bigger, I could totally do it. And how does this work? Well, what does this look like to you? It looks like, to me, a table layout panel, right, for the form. In fact, if we rename this, we can rename it the About Form Table Layout Panel. About Form Table Layout Panel, right? That's what this is, the About Form Table Layout Panel. And if I go to my little smart arrow, you can see that here I want to look at my rows, so I'm going to edit rows and columns. I can look at my rows. You can see that I have 5 rows here. The bottom one is 10%, and this big one is 50%. Let's make it so that the middle one is only 40%, just to show you how to modify it, and the bottom one is 20%. And then press OK. You can see that immediately it'll make this grow. And this way I can make my box as big as I want. Let's say I want to make a bigger button. I don't know, I'm crazy. Look, it even named it properly, OK button. And if I go down to my font, I can change my font size back to my lovely 20 if I really want it. I mean, it's pretty crazy. There we go. So I make my own custom OK button. All these things in the form are customizable. Okay, but how do I go about it? Remember, all these are forms. And if I think about it, I have to instantiate it. This is just a class right now. That means that in my program.cs, and now this is the example that I wanted to show you. Remember last week I said public. Also notice it's a little different. Our partial class has some stuff in it already. Why? Because there's stuff. You're seeing your table layout panel and all this kind of stuff, right? That we didn't program. Microsoft did it for us. All right, so now that I have my form in my program.cs, I need to instantiate it just like normal. So I'm going to go to, about form, lowercase, is equal to a new about form. And maybe if I spell it right, that'll be good. Excellent. And now, remember what I want to do. When I click on the About menu item, that's when I want the About form to appear. But I don't want to I don't want to use Show anymore. I want to use Show Dialog. Show Dialog makes a modal form. It makes a form that it stops me from going. I can't move on in my application until I press OK. I want to show you that one. So let's go to main form. In my main form.cs designer, you can see I have this help, right? And under help, I have about. I want to double click on about. It creates this event handler for the About Toolstrip Menu Item Click event, right? And now what I want to do is I want to go to program.aboutform.showDialog, which is different than we've seen before. That's a different thing. Show dialog is different than show. And I'll show you the effect of that in a second. This is the event handler for the, I'll be okay, for the About Toolstrip menu item click event. And if I run it, let's see how this looks. 1 Mississauga, 2 Mississauga, 3 Mississauga. Oh, it comes up. I go to help. I go to about, and it comes up with this. Hey man, look what's coming up. I got some information that comes up here. I never put that information in. Where does it get that information from? I'll show you. I can't go on. Look, if I try and click away the form, minimize it, close it, it won't allow me to because this is a modal form. It stops my stuff from operating, right? The only way I can get out of this is if I close X or OK. And then I can do something else. So where does it get that information from? That it showed up in my About form. It gets it from, let's go back to my Solution Explorer for a second. Let's go to right click on my solution, my project, and go down to properties. What you're going to see under application on the left is this thing that says assembly information. Under assembly information, you can see that my title is what it is. I can change it here. I can make it so the title is spaced out or change the title altogether. Lesson 11, C. And I can make my description. This application demonstrates menu strips, right? Tool strips, and the data grid view, which I'm going to show you later. My company is Centennial College, or whatever your company is called. I can make a product ID that's different, so the product name can be whatever I want. Well, actually, it should be called My App, right? My App. There we go. And then if I have a trademark, I can put that there, and if I press OK, and you can see if I save it, and I can close it now, and if I press play, 1 Mississauga, 2 Mississauga, 3 Mississauga comes up, help, about, and you can see that it says about my application. My application is called My App. My copyright is 2019. My company is Centennial College, and a little bit of description. This application demonstrates menu strips, tool strips, and the data grid view, and press OK, and then it closes. Again, you can choose all that stuff yourself. I think it's a pretty cool thing to have in your application. Always have an about page that talks about your author, who you are, and I've asked you actually, if you look through it, it says, in your assignment number 5, it says, please put your author information in there, right? If you want. It's not gonna hurt you to do it in any assignment, right? One thing to note is if I go back to my properties and I go to my assembly information, it shows me a bunch of different things here, like title, description, and so on. But remember that I can modify what my form says. So going back to it, going back to this, into my about form.cs, it says, okay, well, what do I got here? I got my text format for my assembly title. My label product text is my assembly product, and so on. I'm getting some information here. But I can also add some other information, like let's say my own information I can put in here. Or I can always change the design of this slightly and put an author section in a different row. I mean, it's up to you how you want to do it, right? Maybe you don't want to show your version code, or maybe you don't want to show your copyright, or maybe you don't want to show something else. It's up to you. And normally we would definitely change this out because this is just a picture that came with Microsoft stuff. All right? So maybe your application image would come here. So that's the about form in very, very quick kind of a way of showing it. Questions around the about form? That covers one of the requirements in assignment 5. Your about form is required. Okay, so now we're left with the real meat of the application. I want to be able to connect to a database. That's what I asked you to do. That's what we're doing in this PowerPoint, right? So sure, I added this in. One thing I missed, sorry, I missed one more thing. I could also add in my menus and toolbars, I could add a tool strip. A tool strip's different than a menu strip because it just gives you icons. Watch. So here's my icons, but there's no icons, right? Again, just like before, what you could do is you go to your little smart arrow and you can say insert standard items, and it does this. So it inserts all these things. And again, we don't need a new file. We definitely need open, save. We don't need print. We don't need cut and paste, right? Any of these things, or the separator. And you can see that just like up here in Visual Studio where you have these quick hit items and menus, you can do the same thing here, right? Which is pretty good practice. Here would be the info. Let's say I want to make this the about. How would I do this? Double click. If I double click on this, it'll generate another help tool strip button. Click. And maybe what I want to do is just show the about form. So I just do the same thing. I'll just copy paste the about form stuff from here into here. And now whether you choose the about form or choose that little question mark, you're going to get the about form. Let's take a look. I'm not going to count anymore. If I click this little button now, if I open it up, I can get this. Just like I can get this. To put all these there. So again, all I did was if I go to main form, all I did was I go to toolbox and I dragged the tool strip over, and then when I click on the tool strip on the side, it says insert standard items. That's all you need to do, and then just delete the ones you don't want. What if I want to put my own item? I can do that. I can put in my own item a button, a label, a split button. I can put a drop down box. I can put a separator or combo box. I can make my own progress bar. I can do whatever I want here on this tool strip, and it's really, really flexible, right? So kind of cool. All right, like I said, the meat and bones. In my PowerPoint, it says, hey, I want to drag this, this data grid view. And it looks like this. The data grid view kind of takes up the entire space of my application, right? Pretty much. And why is that? Let's take a look. So if I go to the left here in Toolbox, this time I want to hide this one and go to Data. And there's something called the data grid view. I want to drag this out this time. And let's just make sure that it takes up at least this size, okay? So something that looks like this big. Okay, well we have a data grid view, but if I just run it like this, look what happens, guys. It doesn't do anything, right? It just shows me this. Nothing. I want to populate this with data, but I need data to populate it with. I've given you a SQL file for assignment number 5, and I'll show you how to connect to that later on. But today, let's make a new connection. One thing to note is this. You need to have access to data sources. And if you notice on the left, parked on the left-hand side here, I have data sources parked on the left, right? There's also other things you can see on the left. If I go to View, I want to look at Server Explorer. Please go to Server Explorer. So again, View Menu, Server Explorer. Notice it says something that looks like this. And guess what? Look at my server. Under my server, I see, don't worry about this little message. Under my server, I see desktop 39 blah 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 blah. Guess what that is? That's my computer, right? Your computer will be something different than mine. So this is the data view, the data view for my computer. Take a look at this little button here, SQL Server Object Explorer. You can get it here, or you can go to View and look at SQL Server Object Explorer up here. Please open that up. What it's going to do is it's going to pull this. Okay, now I have a couple of databases here. Take a look at this. This is by default. I'm just going to make this larger so you can see it. Look, I have LocalDB projects v13, some v13 from a different thing, and I also have this other one. You may only have one. The one we want is the one that says LocalDB MS SQL LocalDB. Do you see that one? Every one of you should have that. If you don't, you need to go to View, and you need to go to SQL Server Object Explorer to see that. And if you can't see that because you're using a Mac or you have a different version of Visual Studio installed, then you can make it. We'll talk about that in a second. Yes?
You only need one of those LocalDB?
Only one. We're going to use the first one. We're going to use the MS SQL LocalDB. Now notice on the left-hand side, if you don't have that, there's a little button here, and I could add a connection to a SQL server that I have access to. So if I click this little button, it'll bring up a dialog box for me to connect, whether it's local. Does it give you another option when you bring it up? Is there anything local for you? Because you didn't see it, right? Do you see this? Do you see this? One of these two? No? Do you see anything? You may not have it installed. Yeah, you may have something missing in your installation, right? Okay, but what I really want to do is I want to do that. I want to just click this one here. You can see that under my LocalDB, I have databases, and I created one earlier today called Test Database. Let's make one together. We'll call yours, right, Section C, almost like a military organization. You guys are called Section C. Section C database, all right? Let's try this out. So I'm going to go right-click on my database. Let's do it together. I'm going to add new database, and I'm going to call it Section C database, just because we want to be different. And press OK. Again, I'm doing that in LocalDB, MS SQL LocalDB. I'm not doing it in the other one, although I could. If you don't have this, I do apologize. You need to install your installation, and I'm recording this, right? So don't worry about it if you can't get it, because you can always look at this later and install the components and do it. Okay? So notice it says section C database. My database is empty. My database needs a table. Let's make a table for my database. I'm going to go open this up. And inside tables, you can see there's my table view. I'm going to right click on the tables folder and I'm going to add a new table. Like this. And my new table is on the right. It appears on the right hand side. Right? And notice my default table name is right here. I'm just going to do one of these so you can see it. All I did is I right clicked on the table. So when I go to my SQL Server object, I right clicked on tables and I said add new table. That's what I did. Okay? And then I made this. It came to here. This is my table designer, which is actually quite useful for us. Right? So notice that my table name is here. It says table. That's a pretty ugly name. Let's call this the student table. Let's just name it here. Student table. And if I click away, you can see that automatically my table is now going to be called student table. If I name it properly. How about that? Student table. Also, under properties, if I bring up my properties, if I look at my ID, this is a primary key. I need to make this an auto-incrementing primary key. And on the right, you can see that my identity specification is set to false. In order for me to make this auto-incrementing, I need to change this identity specification to true. And notice it just changes down here to identity. Primary key identity. Okay, let's add some fields. This is how you add fields to your table. You go in here and you say something like this. I want a student ID. Right? My student ID, we're going to make it so that it's alphanumeric. We'll say it's varchar or varchar. Some people say varchar. I'm going to go here and make it, I'm going to go down to the bottom and select 10. Change the size so it only takes 10 characters. The first 10. It discards the rest. I'm not going to allow this to be null. We have to enter a student ID. And I want a first name field, which is varchar. I'm going to change this to varchar 50. And I want a last name field, if I can actually spell it properly, last name, which is going to be varchar 50 as well. Just so we have some room. We can make this varchar max too, but that's excessive. Let's just change these ones so they're not null, because we don't want this to be null. Okay, are you with me? So what am I doing here? I'm actually in Table Designer. I haven't made my table yet. My Table Designer that I have here that's built into Visual Studio allows me to design my table. And once I'm done, I can click on this Update button on the left. See this Update Database up here? And again, guys, for those people who can't do the database, I do apologize. You need to have that kind of installed. If I click Update, it brings up another dialog box that looks like this. And it says, my create actions are going to be make a new student table. That's what it's going to be. And I'm going to click on Update Database. When I click Update Database, it's going to show all these check marks, right? It says Update completed successfully. And then if I look at SQL Server Object Explorer on the left, you can see that my table is called dbo.studenttable. All I did was click Update. That's all I did when I made my table. Now, we have no data in the table. My table is empty. My database is really empty. It just has one table, right? And I need to add some data. Well, Microsoft allows us to do the same thing too. Visual Studio allows us to go in there, right, in my student table, right? And I want to add some data. How do I do this? I right-click on the table and go to View Data. Again, I'm on the table that's been created. I'm going to go View Data. It's going to bring me here. Well, not only can I view, but I can also enter. I'm not going to enter an ID that's auto-generated. That's my auto-incrementing primary key. I'm going to go to my student ID and put in my student ID, 300818557 as an example. My first name and my last name. And then I'm going to keep typing, if I can type my name today. I'm going to keep typing. Maybe I'll make another one, 300717558. And this one will be John Smythe, sure. And 300919339. And that'll be, Nancy Drew. And we'll go to the next one, which is 300911225, and that'll be, I'm making these up, guys. If it's your student ID somehow I stumble upon, it's totally a mistake. All right, and let's Tony Stark. Long live Iron Man. Long live Iron Man. All right, and then one more, 300910001, and we'll call this Peter Parker. You can make your own. All right, so I've got some stuff, and guess what? That's the data on the table. Huh? Red means it hasn't been updated. If you enter in the wrong data, it won't allow you to go on. Right? So if you enter in too many characters or not enough characters, or if it's something required you didn't enter in, it'll give you an error. Right? All right, good. So now that we've done this, guess what? This is our data, guys. I've already entered my data in. Fantastic. Now I have two things I've made. I made a database, which is my data source, and I have a table. Now I can connect to it with my data grid view. Let's do that. So now that I have this, I can hide this, and I can hide this, and I can hide this, and now I'm back to this. It's my data grid view. All right. Now remember, my data grid view right now is useless. It needs to connect to the data. Later on, not today, but another day, we're going to connect to this data manually. Today, we're going to connect to this data automatically, like this. I'm going to go to this little thing right here. So the smart arrow. Follow me here, guys, because you're going to miss this, and then you're going to go, well, where'd you go? Smart arrow on the data grid view. You already have your data table at this point, okay? Or you have access to one. And I'm going to click the smart arrow, and it's going to take me to this option. Look, it says choose data source. My data source is none. I'm going to pull this down, and it's going to say add project data source. So remember that even though I have a database, I haven't connected my data source to my project. My database could be in the cloud somewhere, could be on a file. I want to connect it somehow, so I'm connecting to a database. Huh? Where did I go? See, you're not watching. All right, so I'm here in my data grid view. I'm going to click on this little smart arrow, and I'm going to go here to this little pull-down menu and go to Add Project Data Source. It's going to pull this up. There's some options here, and later on we're going to do this again, not in this particular application, but in another one, where we're going to use the entity framework to connect, which is way more powerful than this, right? This is the older way of connecting, okay? But let's do it this way now. Hey, here's my database. I'm going to click Next. Here's my data set. I'm going to click Next. Okay, it's going to say, I need a connection. I'm going to need a connection. And I'm going to make a new connection. Forget what it says here for me. Make a new connection. And it's going to say, what kind of connection type? I want SQL Server in this case. Please do not check this box. Always use this selection. Do not check this box. Uncheck it. If you leave this box checked, the next application won't give you an option. All right? So leave this unchecked. Microsoft SQL Server. Okay, then press Continue. All right. Now, be careful. Here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to hit refresh. If you hit refresh, it's going to give you nothing like this again. And it's going to take about 5 minutes to 10 minutes. Please do not do this. This is a waste of time. All right? Instead, what we want to put in here is the stuff that we're missing from over here. Do you remember what it was over here? LocalDB, MS SQL LocalDB. It has to be the exact name. Let's type it in. Like this. LocalDB / MS SQL, right? LocalDB. Like this. How do I know it? I've done it too many times. Not because it makes any sense. All right, so LocalDB is your local database. Microsoft SQL local database is what this is. If you type this exact same way in, and if you're right, if you go down here to this little arrow, you should be able to do this now. And I'm going to see two databases. One is Section C database, and the other one is test database. If you see nothing in here, There's two possibilities. One, you've typed this wrong, or two, you're not connected to a local database. I'm going to select section C database here, like this. And then I'm going to press OK. I'm waiting for you guys to catch up. MS SQL local DB. Are you good? Are you with me? Because if I go by this step, I can't go back. It won't allow me to. I'll have to recreate the data connection again and delete it, and it's going to cause me all kinds of problems. How do I get this? Because basically what you've done is either you haven't created the database properly or in the right space. MS SQL local DB is the one that I chose. You may have chose the wrong one, the other one. Or maybe you didn't choose one at all, or maybe you didn't make your database somehow. But the one you want is the one we made together, section C database. Alright? Alright, so let's say section C database. I'm going to select that one and press OK. When I do that, it's going to come back to here. Which data connection should your application use? This one. I also want to show my data connection here so we can troubleshoot later. And then press next. It's going to select a name for you. Section C database connection string. That's okay. Press next for now. Then it's going to ask you which tables you want. I only have one, the student table. I'm going to select that. And it says the database, the data set name is down here. We can always change any of these things, guys. I'm just selecting them and keeping the selection, whatever they were, and press finish. When I do this, it's going to produce this. But notice that they're not spaced out properly, right? If I press play now, and if I wait, it's going to come up with this, and it's all going to be crushed in here. That's no good. How do I make that better? Well, there's options. That's the answer. If I go to here, on the right, let's go and do some options on the right. So this is my data grid view. Let's call this what it's supposed to be. Student data grid view, right? That's what it is. My student data grid view. So if I go here to my student data grid view, let's do it. Students data grid view. We don't need the one at the end. And look what it did down here. It created these three more components down here on the bottom in your gutter. Whenever you connect a data source, it connects all kinds of stuff. By the way, like I told you, this is the automatic way of connecting. We're going to do it manually later, not today. Alright, so here's my student data grid view. Let's scroll down here. It says alternating rows, default cell style. Right now, it's data grid view cell style. If I click onto this, you can see that I have some information. My font size, I can change my font size. Right now my font size by default is 8 for this option, right? I can change other stuff. Auto size columns mode. Right now my auto size columns mode is off or none. Let's make it so that it is fill. Or, yeah, fill is good. Fill does this. So I went to auto size columns mode. I went to fill. Now here's something different, guys. I got to talk about. The data grid view gives you a bunch more properties than you've ever seen before, but also removes properties that you're used to seeing. Okay? Because they're hidden. Here's another one. Auto size rows mode. The reason why they're all compressed. Let's go from none to displayed cells. Let's run this thing again and see what it looks like. Yeah. And notice also that I got this funny little bar. I got my little scroll bar. Guys, I didn't do any of that. That's all by default Microsoft. Right? So I'm getting data access right like this. And when you look at this, this is a beautiful thing. Yeah. Yeah, because we went in there and changed the size. Remember that font size? You changed it. You can change it back. So if I go, what you did was actually went to here. You went to alternating row size. Where is it? Rows defaults, cell style. here, you can change this back to the font size. You can change it to 20. You probably changed to 8, right? And you probably pressed OK, I pressed cancel. But you could change the back color. So for example, let's say you don't want the back color to be white, you want it so that every other color is like gray. You can do that. You can change the every other row to be gray. And if I press OK, by chance, and I do this, you can see that I'm going to get the same thing as you. Watch. Look, here's gray. So I can change so every other row size is gray if I really want that. And if I want to change it back, I can go back here and change this to white. So just white, back to normal. Alright, but there's no functionality here, guys, at all, right? All we've done is really pull data. Actually, if we look at CRUD, create, read, update, delete, all we've done is the read function. We've pulled in data from the database and we're just reading it. We're not doing anything. Even though it says you're allowed to read and delete and all that stuff, it won't update the database because you need to code that. Alright, so how do we code it? Well, we're going to talk about that next day, but I want to kind of come in here. Let's go back on the right. Edit columns. If I go to edit columns, you can add your own columns, right? You can do it down here on the properties panel. You can also do it here from the smart arrows. If I go to the smart arrow and go edit columns, I can add my own columns. I can also modify the maximum length, input length if I want. For example, my ID is really big. You know, I can also go in here and say that if I scroll down to my desired, let's make this really bigger. You can see that my column type is data grid view text box column. You could change this to a different kind of column. For example, I can make it a button column or a checkbox column or a combo box column or anything else I want. And the same thing goes with my fill weight is 100. I can also say that my width, instead of 179, I can specify a width, be very specific. Let's say I want it so it's the width is 50. Let's try that. If I said the width is 50 and press OK. And then when I run it, maybe it's going to change the width to 50. Maybe. Maybe not. That's because I've filled. I use that fill instead of data flow. I did fill. Here's another thing. I'm checking on these different cells. What I want you guys to do is when I click a cell, right? When I select a cell, the whole cell selects like this, the whole row. And when I take this whole row, I want to take that row, the whole row thing, and take all that information and pop it somewhere. How do I do that? Well, one thing to note is that the data grid view has a bunch of different events. For example, I have my cell content click event, right? If I click on content or if I click on a cell, I can make a specific event, and maybe what I can do is I can highlight that whole row, whatever that cell is. I'm going to give you the code for that, all right? So bear with me. Not today. Today, we're just connecting to the database, and we've done a lot. Menus. We also talked about the tool strip. Let's also talk about the code a little bit. So one of the things to note is that on the back end, what's happened is when we added a table in the main form load event, it automatically added this code. It does this. It says, hey, student table adapter, fill the table with the stuff from the section C database data set, and look at the student table itself and fill the information from the student table inside the data grid view. That's what it's doing. Guys, we're not going to do this. This is automatic, right? Later on, I'm going to give you some specific code to use so we can make it manual and control everything that's in those tables exactly. All right? One more thing to do before we go for today is I want to be able to make a button to get the table or data from the table. How do I do that? Well, if you notice in the PowerPoint, it actually gives that hint on how to do it. So it tells you, okay, what we want to do is on form load you get this, but actually on the button, I want to be able to get all the students from the table. and I want to do it on some kind of show button. Let's make a show button first. So I'm going to go into my main form, and let's suppose I make a button. I'll put it on the bottom of my form down here somewhere. So I'm going to go to my toolbox. I'm going to go to my common controls, button, drag and drop. Here's my button. Haha. Oh, I love when it does this. This is a mess up. That's what this is. Oh, it is. There we go. Whew. Let's just drag it so I can see it. There we go. It's a mess up because of my screen size. Remember my screen size? I made it like 150%. Yeah. So if I go to my properties, I want to change my button property so it's like the show data button. Let's call it show data button. Show data button. So I want to go all the way down to the bottom where it says text, and I want to change this from button to show data. And let's make sure it fits. There we go. And let's put it at the bottom. And let's double click. So when I double click, when I click on my show data button, it's going to do something with the data from the table. How does this work? Double click. Well, now I have my show data button, and I know I have access to this because I filled my information with section sheet database dataset.student table. What about if I use some LINQ for the first time? Let's do this, right? So what I want to do is I want to say var, right? And let's call this student list is equal to from, remember my from, student in, and this is where it becomes really crazy, this dot section database dataset dot student table, right? Where I want every single student, so I don't have to have a where clause, and I say select the student. So here is, my friends, where var becomes very useful. Take a look at what actually it says if I hover over now. It says, woohoo, enumerable row collections in, like angle brackets, section C database dataset dot student table row student list. That's what the type is. Why would I ever want to type that? Ever. It makes no sense. That's why we use var, and it figures it out. That's a great example of where var makes sense. Okay? For floats and strings and such, that's just laziness if you type var. I've been lazy, right? But for this makes total sense. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to do a for loop, a for each loop, right? And I can loop through each of the students inside of my student list, but it's really not a list. It's enumerable, right? So I can say that my student list dot toList. By the way, it's really good practice to convert this stuff from a database to a list. And then I want to debug dot writeLine. We talked about this last week, where debug means I want to use systems dot diagnostics to output this to my output window, right? So debug dot writeLine, we'll say the student ID, right? Which is, let's make the student ID plus, so student dot ID, student ID, and then plus student, or we'll say last name. Student dot last name. Right? I can actually separate this on two little different rows so you can see it better. There we go. But debug has an error because guess what? I haven't included the using system.diagnostics using. I can include that, and once I do, you can see that at the top it adds this system diagnostics using statement, which allows me to output to the output window, this output window right here, right? So what is this doing? When I press the show data button, it accesses the data set where my table is, and then I can read from my table. I can use a LINQ query, that's what this is, to get data from the data set, and then I can store it inside of a local or global or class variable and do something with it, right? So right now, I'm going to just output it to my output window. Let's just try it. So start. It comes to the list. Here it is. And if I click watch on the left here. If I click show data, then I get the data. And that's every time I click it, right? Click it again and again. So a very, very quick and dirty introduction to how do I get data from a database and use a data grid view. And data grid views, the first thing you're going to learn about them is it's great for displaying data in a big list. And this is exactly what we need for assignment number 5. However, we need to do some modifications. When I click on a row, I want the whole row selected. Anywhere on the row. If I click here, 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 in the middle, somewhere, I want the whole row selected. How do I do that? It's an event. If I click on my cell, I want it to select the entire row. How do I do that? Well, each cell of the row that I selected, remember, I'm going to get my sender. What is the sender? The sender is actually going to be a table row cell, right? Table row cell, yes. And then from the table row cell, I want to know which one it is. Which is the ID? Which is the ID of the object? Once I have the ID, then I can do my select statement. From my student in my database, where my ID equals to the ID that I got from the row that I selected, give me that one only. Once I have that one, I can modify it, I can change it, I can delete it, I can get my data from it, and I can output it wherever I want, right? Which is part of what you're doing, right? Look, I never asked you to do full CRUD with your database. In your assignment number 5, I asked you just to read the data from the database and store it in a file. And file storage, my friends, we'll do on Wednesday. Okay, when we talk about file storage, how to do a read stream and a write stream, how do I do that with C#? You guys have already done that, but we're going to do that with Windows Forms. Okay, that's it for me. I will see you guys on Wednesday. I'm going to put this up on GitHub. Thanks.